Bine v-am găsit la ediția săptămânală a emisiunii Realități și perspective. Astăzi vrem să vă prezentăm în cadrul acestei emisiuni un film documentar. Titlul acestui film, Transumanismul, reinventarea umanității prin tehnologie. Așa după cum vă așteptați, e un film despre tehnologie pe care dorim să vi-l prezentăm din nou la sfârșitul acestei luni, când pe canalul Alfa Omega TV am difuzat insistent programe care țin de creaționism. De altfel, genericul întregii luni și aceste săptămâni a fost Verdictul științei creației. Iată că vă prezentăm în finalul acestei luni septembrie un documentar mai deosebit. Desigur, ne-am obișnuit ca tehnologia să fie folosită de noi, de ființa umană, de societatea contemporană pentru îmbunătățirea vieții noastre, pentru a aduce lucruri noi, moderne în viețile noastre. Perspectiva acestui documentar este însă puțin diferită. În ce măsură noi, ca și creștini, vom face față, vom înțelege, vom putea să reacționăm la modificări genetice, la cercetări științifice care au de-a face cu ființa umană. Un film documentar care se vrea o provocare și un îndemn la rugăciune și meditație. Transumanismul, reinventarea umanității prin tehnologie.
Just the beginning.
We like to talk about what nobody else is talking about. So many people today, especially young people, have as questions in the back of their mind.
To discovering reality, what's really true.
People should have a basic knowledge of what is happening. They most definitely ought to be advised.
Warn them, warn them, warn them.
Because in the very near future, it's going to begin to impact all of us.
People don't realize about technology is that we think we're using these tools to enhance our lives. Left unbridled, they can destroy the society as we know it. Is man going to live longer, or is he going to be better, or whatever? We're missing the big picture here.
We're moving now from technology being a tool to actually being an act of faith.
We don't consider how much technology changes everything.
We've already passed the Rubicon. We've already entered in to what I would call the embryonic stages of human genetic modification. We have crossed that really important line in the sand, and now we're doing it.
So that should wake up a lot of people, and a lot of scientists that are really upset as they realize how far they've drifted from reality.
What will the cost be to human society? Well, I'm very concerned about what that cost will be, and I'm not alone. Some of the brightest minds on earth right now are concerned about what that might be.
Our future is going to be more turbulent than most people have any capacity to imagine, and the people that are least prepared for that future are the American citizens.
Be aware that what this film is discussing is not hyperbole, it's not hype. Hear it.
Most people don't realize that there are highly classified contracts by all the major developing countries, whether you're talking about China, Russia, the United States, for the super soldier.
They've learned how to read brainwaves and how to translate and interpret brainwave activity to the point that now, games makers are making game systems, and kids are moving objects around on screens by thought alone, just by wearing a headset.
So much is happening right now, and we're reaching a point where we can do things that we never thought were possible.
This is a brave new world that's coming on the scene that I think is going to be shocking to a lot of people, and should be shocking.
for good reasons, Chuck.
This is where it starts to get interesting, is because what's pushing all these, besides their normal pressures of advancement, is an arms race.
Big parade. Let's turn the tide of war. Sensory equipment and artificial intelligence.
There's this enormous mystery waiting to be unlocked. You know, as humans, we can identify galaxies light years away. We can study particles smaller than an atom, but we still haven't unlocked the mystery of the 3 pounds of matter that sits between our ears. And the Brain Initiative will change that by giving scientists the tools they need to respond to our thoughts. And that knowledge will be transformative.
The Jasons, the uppermost scale, most brilliant minds, they are an elite group of scientists that advise the U.S. Pentagon. They're saying to our U.S. military that they have to get ahead of human alteration, including genetic enhancement, because otherwise our competitors or enemies are going to dominate us, let's say, on the battlefield or in the marketplace.
The soldier whose capabilities of motion, of fighting, of perception, of communication with their partners, being enhanced by these technologies. There is a huge, well-funded drive for the super soldier.
We can't afford to miss these opportunities while the rest of the world races ahead. We have to seize them.
Now we have it in military budgets.
In the budget I will send to Congress next week, I will propose a significant investment by the National Institutes of Health, DARPA, and the National Science Foundation to help get this project off the ground.
DARPA, for instance, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, they have in this year's budget literally millions of dollars to create the blueprint for changing the DNA of our soldiers on the battlefield, produce what they're calling the 47th human chromosome.
And every dollar we spend to map the human genome has returned $140 to our economy.
Is kind of a high-tech way of being able to jack in to soldiers on the battlefield in terms of like biological warfare. They would need to do something to make rapid genetic modification to them on the battlefield that might somehow improve their immune systems or something to make them more resilient for biological warfare purposes.
So the world we're looking at, that's only a few years, we're not talking decades, you know, the year 2040 or something, you're talking in the 2020s, if you will, where the kind of world we'll be living in is very different than the one we know today. The thing that's impacting all our lives is that the rate of progress within 4 technologies are converging. Genetics, of course, we all have heard about DNA, and we understand that they're constantly making huge discoveries in that area. But another technology that is relevant to all this is robotics. A third technology is nanotechnology, making machines that the size of molecules. Tiny, tiny little robots that you can put in the bloodstream that can find a diseased area and have a 10,000 to 1 advantage of administering a medication, as an example. There's a fourth that overlays all of these called artificial intelligence. As computers continue to advance, and the software also continues to advance, they predict a day only a few years away. We're not talking decades, we're talking just a few years away, where the computers will exceed the capacity of the human brain. So what has emerged here is a goal of what some people call transhumanism.
How do you do?
To create a superhuman being.
It would be a little unkind to present this picture without just a word of friendly warning. We are about to unfold the story of Frankenstein, a man of science who sought to create a man after his own image, without reckoning upon God. It is one of the strangest tales ever told. It deals with the two great mysteries of creation, life and death. I think it will thrill you. It may shock you. It might even horrify you. Well, we've warned you.
We're not talking science fiction here. We're talking about the aspirations of the most knowledgeable practitioners of these technologies. We're heading into a very strange world.
We have entered into what many people at work in advanced fields of science are calling the hybrid age. There are laboratories that are actually conducting experiments on human genetic re-engineering. And when they use the term the hybrid age, what they're saying is that in the same way that we went through the agrarian age, the same way we went through the industrial age, the same way we are now in the information age, they're saying that in the hybrid age, what we have been doing with genetically modified crops, what we are and have been doing with genetically modified animals, we also are going to do to humans. There are federal grants that are being given to universities for the very purpose of dividing the guidelines that will be used for human genetic alteration. We're already merging human and animal genetic material in laboratories, in literally tens of thousands of laboratories all over the world right now, including here in the United States. We are blending pigs with human genetics. And we're creating humanized pigs for the purposes of what's called xenotransplantation, so they can create organs that may have enough human genetic material in it that they could then transplant it into a human and then not be rejected by our immune systems. And the Academy of Medical Science in Britain is like the FDA here. So it's an important scientific body. And they put out a 200-page report just a few months ago called Animals Containing Human Material, or ACHM. And I would advise people to read their report because they acknowledge that we probably already have islands of Dr. Moreau. We probably already have settings in which we are raising fully mature, part human, part animals. And they have said that thousands of ACHM are being created around the world, and we need an international regulatory commission to oversee the creation of these exotic half-human, half-animals that they believe are probably being raised to full maturity. And then they'd start describing the things they're concerned about, and that is animals that would have procreative abilities with humans, so that you could literally breed a human with an animal and get an offspring. Animals that have human cognitive-like abilities, the ability to think, so that you could have a mouse questioning, where did I come from? Is there a God? What is my life about, right? In fact, there was a very intelligent scientist by the name of Ivan Balaban who worked at the McGill University in Montreal, Canada. Took the developing brains of embryonic chickens and he genetically engineered it into the brains of embryonic quail. And then when that species was born, these chickens grew and started exhibiting the vocal trills and the head bobs of quail. What he was able to prove with that experiment is that very, very complex behavior patterns can be transferred from one species across species lines to another species through genetic engineering. As we start changing ourselves genetically, as we alter our genotype, and our genotype is what we get from our parents. It is the blueprint that makes us what we are. You're born to two human parents, you have that genotype, therefore you don't become a monkey. You become a human, you have the blueprint. But as you start altering the genotype, you alter something else that we learn in basic biology in school, and that is the phenotype. Phenotype is how your genotype is expressed, meaning the way you walk, the way you look, your human characteristics, right? Your persona, the fact that you're bipedal. That's the phenotypic expression of your genotypic makeup. And what the Department of Defense is literally saying is that as we start altering soldiers on the battlefield in terms of their genotype, they're going to begin expressing alterations in their phenotype. They're going to walk different, they're going to think different, they're going to look different. In the near future, will we have crime scenes where a serial rapist who is part wolf has conducted some type of criminal activity, and it would fall plumb outside of everything we know today about profiling. There are think tanks today, military strategists, who are very, very concerned. I mentioned the Jasons earlier. They're one of numerous groups that are writing white papers for our military talking about the dangers of the near future that cannot be avoided because the technology is already here and it's already being developed around the world. And that's actually the largest, #1 policy think tank in the world, talking about things like near future genetically engineered humans that will be sufficiently different than you and I, so as that you cannot assume that they would be protected by the Constitution, which was written for humans as we know them. In fact, it's based on biblical ideas that we have a creator and that our rights are protected as a result of that divine act. They're actually trying to create the legalese around this question right now in order to assure that near future genetically altered humans will be protected by the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights, because that cannot yet be assumed depending on how much they are altered genetically. What they're saying is that forms of humanity in the near future will be created, and we are their creators, not God.
A man of science who sought to create a man after his own image without reckoning upon God.
My name is Rachel Haywire. I'm the founder of the Extreme Futures Festival. For people that were into evolution, I was on the board of directors for Humanity Plus, the leading transhumanist organization. Transhumanism is kind of a merging of the technology world with the human world and being able to extend our capacities so we can do things that we're not really supposed to do as humans. What we know as humanity today isn't going to be what we know as humanity in 10 years. We're on the cusp of something really big right now, and what we've previously thought of as humanity is just going to become something that we look back on. It's inevitable. It's who we're becoming.
To what extent can we alter humans by rewriting their genetic makeup?
And genetic enhancement is one of the more controversial parts of transhumanism, but I think it's very important because transgenetics is the altering of our own DNA and transcending the genetic world that we're currently living in. We should alter all of our DNA. Why stop at just a partial alteration? Let's go all the way. Let's see what we can do with genetics.
And we are doing this now in gene doping, like is suspected in a lot of the Olympics this last time around, that was giving these people temporary superhuman-like abilities and some of the incredible records that were reset. That would be one type of genetic modification of a human, but that does not become a permanent part of your genotype, meaning you would not pass that on to your children if you had children. It doesn't affect your genotype. Now at the germline genetic level, this is where you make alterations to a human at the embryo or even earlier at the sperm level or the egg level at such an early stage that it becomes a permanent part of the blueprint of that human, so that from there forward, all succeeding persons born down line from that individual will also inherit those genetic alterations. There are those who are strongly advocating that we begin altering humans at the germline genetic level so that we can make superior people who will then pass on forever those improvements as they perceive them to the human bloodline. And that's one of the scariest parts in this germline genetic engineering, because it could permanently undo what we know as the human genetic makeup. But of course, what you're also really saying is that you will undo humans as they were made by God permanently. We have crossed that really important line in the sand, and now we're doing it. One of the leading transhumanists in the world is a professor by the name of Nick Bostrom.
Nick Bostrom says that whatever we can do to improve humanity, we should do. And I definitely agree with that statement. I think that if we have something available to us, that we should use it because we're in a perpetual state of evolution.
And Professor Bostrom actually earned his prestigious seat at Oxford University by writing his thesis, a paper called Transhumanist Values. And it's very interesting in there where he talks about as we begin merging ourselves with animals, we may open new modes of perception because he says some animals can see into areas of the light spectrum that we cannot see into. I believe that he's right, where animals may be able to see into other modes of perception, including what we would call the supernatural realm.
I think merging animal and human DNA is a very controversial issue, and we should do it in a way that enhances our capacity on everything from being able to fly to having gills, like fish, and being able to swim underwater to being able to run as fast as a cheetah. And, like everybody sees machines as the next step of evolution, but for all we know, it could be, humans and animals, and I think that's really exciting. So we should definitely look into merging animal DNA with human DNA, but we shouldn't do anything that would violate the animal. So much is happening right now, and we're reaching a point where we can do things that we never thought were possible.
Whole series of lectures on transhumanism were being funded at the Arizona State University by the Templeton Foundation. Some of the kids there at the university started asking spiritual questions. If we start changing ourselves, do we also change ourselves spiritually? Would our ability to talk to God maybe be enhanced? Would we be able to see into dimensions where there are supernatural realities? They started asking those questions. And so Arizona State University started a brand new project called the Sophia Project. Sophia, after the Greek god who can help you make contact with the other side, that's why it was called that. They stated on their website that the purpose of it was to confirm and or to make contact with, and then they named what they wanted to make contact with: aliens, demons, angels, a universal mind, God. So among transhumanists, there are those who also are very spiritual in the sense that they imagine how transforming us in terms of our biology is also going to transform us in terms of our spirituality. And there are among transhumanists those who believe that this might open a doorway that could bring us literally into the presence of God.
Going beyond humanity is very spiritual because it's reaching a godlike state that has previously only been understood as like a type of meditation or what some people call nirvana. But I think that we're going to be able to reach this through exploring the technological realm. We get to know ourselves better.
This is in turn causing research to be done in some interesting areas. Professors are studying not only how to connect an arm directly to the mind, that's part of it, but they're actually connecting their neural network to machinery.
A lot of the hacker spaces now where people are doing biomechanical implants and they're actually like giving each other cybernetic implants. If we can jack into the internet or like some type of dark net, that would be very spiritual because we wouldn't need to use the traditional methods of computers to go into a virtual state. We could just do it with our own brains.
Understand that these are people that are incredibly skilled in their technologies that have absolutely zero understanding of demonology. The realization that opening up a communication channel can be a two-way channel. And that can create what we call in demonology an entry. And they're playing with things that they don't fully understand.
Even if you're only scientific and you have no belief in anything spiritual, what do you think it is to expand your mind? That is spiritual. You cannot get around that.
Distracted by a world that I don't understand.
People who have been tracking these four technologies are familiar with this tide of interest in the direction of transhumanism. Is the whole area of artificial intelligence. Or some people would express it the simulation of cognitive behavior. But the fact that software can learn has staggering implications, especially in the large-scale sense. And of course, this is a very popular theme in fiction, but it's also a very real horizon that we're approaching, that these machines go far, far beyond the capabilities of the designer.
The combined intellect of the neuroscientists, engineers, mathematicians pales in comparison to even the most basic AI. Once online, a sentient machine will quickly overcome the limits of biology. And in a short time, its analytical power will be greater than the collective intelligence of every person born in the history of the world. Some scientists refer to this as the singularity. I call it transcendence.
When you look at what the human brain can do, it's really amazing the way we can reason about things and think very deeply about things. But where we start to run into a wall is when we're faced with leveraging huge volumes of data. In order to push the boundaries of human cognition, we want to provide access to all of that data to facilitate or enable human cognition beyond these barriers.
The essence of cognitive computing, to me, is making computers actually more like biological systems, whether or not they're brains.
And the computers we've been using for the past 60 years have been amazing machines, but they've all been slaves to a program that's been pre-written, where we're trying to invent an entirely new computer architecture that works more like the way our brains do, and there's no program. We do the things we do because of the way our brains are configured.
But having that kind of fluidity where they respond and react appropriately. So you feel like you're dealing with another living thing, not a machine.
Some of the aspirations of the transhumanists is a presumption that they can take our consciousness, which is really software, not hardware, and transfer that into another environment. The day that the computer, in its elegance, exceeds the capacity of the human mind is a day when they can take a human consciousness and put it inside a computer and have it reside there.
Mind uploading would be an example of transhumanism, where you would put your brain into a computer and you would operate from, I guess, like a more programmer type of stance, where anything is possible.
Ray Kurzweil likes to call that point of crossover the singularity.
The singularity is technology becoming more godlike and becoming more capable than humanity is. When technology can do more than humanity can, we have reached a period of singularity.
Well, once they get that far, they've achieved immortality.
The singularity for some people is like religion.
So the first thing you need to understand, I can't really see you. I can see the temporary residence that you're in. If I had my computer here, and you knew everything there was to know about every resistor, every wire, every part in that computer, could you tell me anything about its behavior? And the answer is no. Because the hardware is simply the environment that the software resides in. To know what its behavior is, you have to understand its software. The real you, call it soul, spirit, give it what labels you like, the real you is software, not hardware. Now, software has some peculiar characteristics. I can take software and send it through the air. It has no mass. Einstein made history by recognizing we live in a four-dimensional continuum, not three. The three spatial dimensions we know, length, width, and height, and time. A physicist today will not speak of space or time separately, he speaks of space-time. Time is a physical property, and that's profoundly important to understand. Software has no mass, which means software has no time dimension. The real you is eternal, whether you're saved or not.
And that while our body might not go beyond death, our minds might. We're only scratching the surface. There is the simulation argument, which a lot of people would say is what we have right now. And whether they think it's that some God created this universe and that we're all living in it, creationism is a simulation itself, or whether they think that like some hyper machine has created this world and that we're living in a program.
We look at the macrocosm, that which is larger than man. and that puts us in the field of astronomy and astrophysics, we discover that the universe is finite. That means it had a beginning. And that's what led to the speculations that are clustered as what we call the Big Bang theories. If you go the other way, and I'll call the microcosm, things that are smaller than us, that leads you into the field of subatomic particles, and there it's even more shocking because we discover there's a limit to smallness. That's bizarre. If I have a string, I can cut it in half and then take what's half and cut that in half. You'd think that at least conceptually I could do that forever in what we call quantum physics. We discover to our amazement that there's a distance, 10 to the minus 35 centimeters, I believe the number is, that if you try to cut it in half, your thing loses a property called locality. It suddenly becomes everywhere at one time, and that's so bizarre. Some of the early discoveries of that committed suicide because they couldn't handle the implications of it. I'm quoting from Scientific American, June of 2005, an article about the constancy of physics. That if the constants of physics are changing, that implies that our reality is a shadow of a larger reality. Because if it's finite in smallness and it's finite in largeness, then the thing that we experience as physical reality is a subset or a shadow of a larger reality.
I find the simulation argument interesting because you can't really disprove it. For all we know, we could be in a simulation right now.
So we're dealing here in this discussion a thing called hyperspaces. There's spaces in more than three. Whether it's length, mass, energy, or time, they're all made up of indivisible units you can't divide, sort of like pixels, so to speak. Now that is shocking. That means that the universe that we're in is a digital simulation.
It feels like we are in a simulation because, we can't really get out of this universe. We have no idea what it's like to be unplugged from this reality. When we reach a point where everything is connected, that's going to become the dominant state that we're in. We won't even call it digital, we'll just call it the world around us. Some people, they would consider Google Glass transhumanism. Other people, they would consider the internet transhumanism. Transhumanism is the next step of evolution, the part that comes after human.
Many in the transhumanist community are today designing their vision of the future based on some of those ideas, whether they're really realistic or not. They may speak of the future in utopian-like language. We're going to be better, we're going to be superhuman, right? We're going to be X-Men, we're going to have these fantastic capabilities.
The idea of superhumans is very exciting. We're going to have these hyper capacities that make us almost into these godlike beings where our consciousness right now is going to merge with a higher cybernetic consciousness. Very exciting. Everybody knows about comic books and everybody knows about this cyber reality that we're creating. Science fiction is a driving force behind reality. People, they read science fiction books and they literally copy what they read and they make it into a reality now. I think sci-fi is a gateway to the future. People that are into transcending humanity are also into transcending, I guess, what you would consider the dominant paradigm, the matrix, if you want to call it that. Free thinkers are into going beyond this world and into going beyond what they currently are. And what we can do to program our reality with psychedelics is going to be something is already something that we can do to program reality with technology. Technology is the new LSD. Everything that Timothy Leary talked about, being able to alter our own consciousness, that's what we're going to be able to do with technology. That's what we're already doing. There are different groups of transhumanists right now. There's everything from the hard scientists who only believe in logic and rationality to the more spiritual transhumanists that view the singularity as a spiritual event. I think it's very spiritual to transcend the body. by not having the confines of this human body, we're entering a more spiritual realm. By having our minds in a digital world, we're living in a way that is very spiritual, that is very godlike.
They even go so far as to assume that if we can aggregate the collective consciousnesses, that will create what they like to think of as God. At the close of the interview with Ray Kurzweil, they asked him, do you believe that there's a God? And his answer was, not yet.
That's a good answer. I like what Ray Kurzweil says about God not even existing yet, and I would agree with that we don't even know what God is at this point. It's no longer something that humans are creating, it's something that has its own life. Technology becoming its own entity. I mean, some people, they view that as a godlike state, other people, they just view it as a logical extension of science.
That gets to the whole issue of the difference between technology and science. The technologist has as his goal producing something that's useful and works. So he has a validating objective function. The scientist is in a priesthood that clings to dogma. And it's important to understand those dogmas if you're going to advance in your career in science, because it's a religion. And it's been deified in our culture as some kind of super priesthood, but it's still a priesthood. Technology and science are two different things altogether. Technology produces products, which means technology is self-validating. Science used to be the quest for truth, but it no longer is. Science is a religion. It has a priesthood. It has creeds.
If we've learned anything, not from science, but from scientists and scientism. Scientism is the religious belief in science to make us gods, I suppose, to give us a better world, to give us immortality, to defeat death. Scientism. If there's anything we've learned from that, is that it has no morals. It bows to no one, and it most certainly bows to no God. It wants to be God.
So I think everybody wants something different to worship, and right now we're kind of at a dead end where, nobody really believes in God anymore. A lot of people, they're just doing it, for the message. But I think that with the development of technology, that we might be able to create gods ourselves, and then we'll have something completely new to believe in.
This is another religion that they can believe in, and it's new, but the idea is really not new, because it's a very old idea when you make God in your own image. With advanced technology, higher technologies, this is just a more sophisticated way of making gods out of rocks and wood.
We are building our own idols right now when we create avatars. Everything from going online and becoming a character on Second Life to creating a robot that has a human personality. We're creating these new idols we want in our lives and that we want to worship. So, just like building our own types of humans, we can build our own types of machines, and we can extend that to say we can build our own types of gods.
This is the ultimate form of a humanist religion where everything revolves around man.
A lot of transhumanists are against anything related to God because they don't want anything outside of transhumanism to really exist. They see God as like the other, and they don't want to dabble in that.
We're talking about, for the most part, people in the science community who would not share a moral world view. It would be more of a Darwinian survival of the fittest. And ultimately what that can wind up doing is lead to eugenics, that if we can improve the human species, we owe it to ourselves to improve the human species. But ultimately that creates a have and have-nots kind of community, so that you have some that have the privileges of being able to afford enhancement, others who can't afford enhancement. And so you have a worker class, worker bees, and then you have the privileged communities, and it starts developing a lot of different kinds of issues, like you saw in World War II with Nazi Germany. They took the whole idea of eugenics to its ultimate belief system and started selectively persecuting the Jews because they considered them to be of an inferior blood stock. And they had the idea they were going to create the Aryan super race, the Übermenschen that Nietzsche, the German philosopher, had dreamed of, which would become Superman. In fact, the Übermenschen is where we get the modern term Superman. But now we're back. And imagine if Hitler had had the sciences at his disposal that we have today, a madman like him.
I'm not sure there's a definite point where we can say, okay, now we're officially transhuman, but I think that by altering our own DNA, we're a step closer. Nobody can stop transhumanism. Transhumanism is going to happen. It's inevitable. It's who we're becoming.
What will the cost be to human society if transhumanist aspirations are reached?
Well, there are a lot of existential risks involved in transhumanism. I mean, anything from the scenario of a bunch of killer robots to the idea of altering our own genetics in a way where we become like these Nazi supermen, which is pretty scary. I think the cost is that people are going to lose what they consider their humanity. And like, even though we're going to become hyper meta-human, a lot of people are going to feel that we've lost what they are, that they've lost their identities, that they've lost just their human conception, their human essence. And I think that's going to be a big deal for a lot of people.
Well, I'm very concerned about what that cost will be, and I'm not alone. Some of the brightest minds on earth right now are concerned about what that might be. Professor Francis Fukuyama, who is a celebrated intellectual, said that he thinks that it is the most dangerous idea in the history of mankind, and he believes that it could lead to an extinction level event that would wipe out all of humanity. Unintended consequences.
Technology has always been abused by governments because the history of technology tends to be the history of weapons. In the past, as someone gained an advantage in technology, they used it for empire. Alexander with his phalanx, and the Romans with their short sword, the machaira, and the unique techniques with it. Certainly gunpowder. Governments have always used technology to gain their own leverage. For the one interesting exception of that was the United States and the atomic bomb. We used that technology to end a war, but we did not use that technology we could have, under a different leadership, could have used that to create a unified global government.
Technology brings power, it brings control. A lot of our motivation for improving our technology is because we want more control, we want more efficiency. The technology encroaches upon us so steadily that we don't realize how it's changing us.
Well, we are victims of our technology as well as beneficiaries. Obviously, especially in the electronic segments, in the information segments, our gains have been enormous on the one hand. On the other hand, it's produced a culture that doesn't read anymore. We used to be a culture that the elite were people that read books, usually typically one a week or something. They took pride in the fact that they consumed books.
People talked like books back in the 1800s. Now we talk like television. The essence of television is visual entertainment. It's stimulation of the eye. It's watching things. And we all have witnessed
how television has changed our attention spans. It's changed our realms of interest. It has changed our command of language. And even as you start mixing technology, you notice, just keep in mind, notice how technology is more and more and more image-oriented. When we think in words. When we reason things out, when we discuss things with ourselves. And there is a direct correlation between our language and our thought patterns. When you take away the language, you start stifling the thought patterns.
Technology is going to help us find out who we are, and that technology is already helping us find out who we are.
And if we keep taking bold steps like the one we're talking about to learn about the brain, then I'm confident America will continue to lead the world in the next frontiers of human understanding.
Through exploring the technological realm, we get to know ourselves better.
Computer chips, GPS technology, the internet, they change our lives in ways that we could never have imagined. All these things grew out of government investments, and the most powerful computer in the world isn't nearly as intuitive as the one we're born with. We have a chance to improve the lives of not just millions, but billions of people on this planet in this BRAIN initiative alone. Computers have become so small, so universal, so ubiquitous, most of us can't imagine life without them. Certainly, my kids can't. Things will get better.
I think transhumanists are conquering death right now. If you talk to Aubrey de Grey, he's a life extension scientist, and he's currently working to end aging. If we pursue anti-aging and genetics, and that if we pursue robotics, that we're going to find a way to not have to die. We're going to find a way to not have to go through aging anymore.
Now those folks are embracing, science, or in some cases pseudoscience and science fiction, in an effort to advance to a higher state. And I think broadly those are people we call part of the transhumanist movement. Immortality is ultimately their goal.
Immortality is very exciting. A lot of people, they'll just associate it with sci-fi, but it's actually something that people are working on now. And by altering our own genetics and by altering our own neurochemistry, we're going to be able to end aging, and we're going to be able to end this process that makes people grow older. We are conquering death as we speak. People are looking to become immortal, and we're on the way right now.
The Bible has a lot to say about immortality. We can create all kinds of, ingenuity that allows people who otherwise might not be able to speak, might not be able to walk, may not have any control over their hands, to be able to use robotic assistants to travel, to speak, to interact in society. I'm all for that. I think it's a good thing. And healing started with the church. We're the first ones who made crutches and wheelchairs and things like that because we believed that as part of our Christian ethos, it was our responsibility to provide healing, to feed the sick and all those things. On the genetic engineering side of it, I think we run into problems fairly quickly. And even among Christian ethicists, there are those who would allow genetic alteration to a point and not past a certain point. There are people like me who believe that if we're talking about genetic alteration in the sense of improved forms of medicine, if I had cancer, I'd much rather hope that a doctor could throw a genetic switch and turn the tumor off than to have to go through radiation therapy, which is simply trying to accomplish exactly the same thing. It's trying to kill the bad genetics and let the good genetics heal themselves. But if the cure then requires altering what it means to be a human, either by adding synthetic forms of life that are not natural or animal forms of life, then it starts becoming a real problem, in my opinion. I think that a war is coming. I think that a war is coming that is going to pit Christian against Christian, religious believers against the true body of Christ. And I see the true body of Christ perhaps even going underground.
To be a biblical Christian is going to be it's going to be more and more difficult to have meetings. I think the Christian collective started in homes. I think that's where it's going to end up. I think these mega churches and so forth, over time, will become the adversaries of the biblical believer. In today's world, if you take the Bible seriously, you need to be prepared to be marginalized. And the plight of the biblical Christian in tomorrow's world will be very analogous to the plight of the Jew in Germany in the 30s. Our future is going to be more turbulent than most people have any capacity to imagine, and the people that are least prepared for that future are the American citizens.
They ought to be aware. People should have a basic knowledge of what is happening, and I think churches ought to be talking about it, because in the very near future, it's going to begin to impact all of us.
Where are the Christians? Where are they in the disseminating of information, using technology to foster and spread the gospel? They're nowhere.
Most of the church is completely unaware of what is coming and how soon it's going to be here. What Christians should be doing is educating themselves in educating others and discussing the ethics that are involved in transhumanism and the coming human enhancement revolution, because it is going to impact all of our lives in one way or another, and probably sooner than most people would believe.
The problem we have as Christians operating in the world is our own fault. It's because we have abdicated our responsibility to be salt and light in that world. You've got dark places all across the world, totalitarian police states. You've got people living in slavery today. And where are the cameras? Technology is once again on our side, because you don't need to have bulky equipment anymore to shine the light. You can do it with an iPhone. We've got to have courage. We've got to take some risks. We've got to get involved. We've got to engage.
I don't believe in God, but I believe that we are becoming more godlike.
If God is not a reality in your life, then you will invent him. What do we seek through God? We seek immortality and relationship through God, right? But if you don't believe in God, how do you do that? Well, then you seek immortality and relationship in other ways. And that's what I think, some people, for instance, the transhumanist movement, sees as a possibility, that they can both be immortal and transcendent. In other words, sort of becoming gods themselves, because if you can achieve immortality, then you have achieved a godlike status.
If we were truly satisfied with our human state, then we really wouldn't need to worship anything. But at the same time, it makes us who we are because we want to improve ourselves, and we have this philosophical yearning. Why do we have a desire to worship something? Maybe we shouldn't be worshiping anything, but I think that we need something higher than us to keep us going. I think that defines what we're doing to become better, to strive for something more. If we just accepted who we were, we would be boring.
But Christians can use this as an opportunity, I think, to preach the gospel, can use it as a special opportunity to refresh arguments in theology that many, many years ago, people like C.S. Lewis would debate these very deep theological ideas about the exceptionalism of what it means to be a human. And now we're talking about post-humanity, and we're going to alter ourselves, and we're going to become something better than what is human. Gives us that opportunity to talk about God's special creation, how we were made in His image, because ultimately, we as believers are going to experience what transhumanists only dream of. In Christ Jesus, we already are immortal and better than human as we know humans today.
Ați urmărit un documentar care s-a vrut o provocare pentru dumneavoastră, un documentar pe care ne-am propus să vi-l prezentăm din nou în finalul acestei luni, când pe Alpha Mega TV am prezentat producții video, documentare, filme care au de-a face cu tema pe care am ales-o pentru această lună, luna de creaționism, un documentar special, provocator, diferit. Și aș vrea să închei subliniind una din concluziile finale pe care unul dintre vorbitori le-a avut în finalul acestui film. Joseph Farag, de la World Net Daily, spunea în finalul acestui film: dacă Dumnezeu nu e o realitate în viața ta, îl vei inventa. Prin Dumnezeu căutăm nemurire și o relație. Dacă nu crezi în Dumnezeu, vei căuta nemurirea și relații prin alte modalități. Așadar, să rămânem cu acest gând, cu această provocare, cu această perspectivă nouă pe care v-am adus-o în această ediție a emisiunii Realități și perspective, aceea a tehnologiei, pusă nu neapărat în slujba ființei umane, dar care poate să aducă provocări în ceea ce privește sistemul nostru de valori. Un film sub genericul Transumanismul, reinventarea umanității prin tehnologie. Vă așteptăm și săptămâna viitoare la o nouă ediție Realități și perspective. Până atunci, Dumnezeu să vă binecuvânteze.
Alpha.